Good evening. My name is Rafael Collazo. I am the National Director of Political Affairs for the Unidos US Action Fund, and I'm honored to moderate this important conversation, Making a Plan to Vote, Latinos Making a Difference in Pennsylvania in 2020. We're having this conversation with national and local leaders that are engaged in not only Latino activism across the board, but specifically helping our brothers and sisters understand the importance of making a plan to vote, what's at stake in this election, and what resources are available to them to vote in this critical election uh, in the state of Pennsylvania that now houses nearly 1 million Latinos and potentially 500,000 Latino voters this cycle. I want to quickly introduce our panel and then get into this great conversation where they're going to provide a lot of information to you around not only how you can make a plan to vote for help your friends and family do the same in Pennsylvania, but what resources are available in the community and how you can support others over the last few weeks as we're less than 2 weeks from Election Day. The first panelist I want to introduce is our national partner and collaborator in this effort, Angela Manso, the National Outreach Director for the National Resources Defense Council Action Fund. Angela, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Someone that's a stranger to no one in Pennsylvania advocacy circles, one of the great advocates we have in the Puerto Rican Latino community in Pennsylvania throughout the country, the president and CEO of Asociación Puertorriqueños de Marcha, Nilda Ruiz. Nilda, always great to see you.
Thank you.
We have, of course, with us the guru of Latino voting rights in Pennsylvania, Will Gonzalez, the executive director of SEBA, and Jody Reinhout, the vice president of strategic initiatives for Esperanza.
Hi, Rafael. Thanks.
The first thing I want to do is ask a couple of our panelists to give some opening thoughts as it relates to the significance of this conversation in this moment in history. I want to turn to Angela as our national partner in this effort to mobilize Latino voters in unprecedented numbers in the state of Pennsylvania in 2020. Can you share with us from the perspective of NRDC Action Fund, what's its some opening thoughts and what's at stake for Latino voters in Pennsylvania in 2020, this election?
Sure. Thank you, Rafael. Buenas noches and good evening to everyone. And it's a pleasure to be here tonight with these incredible guests. On behalf of the NRDC Action Fund, thank you so much for inviting us for this timely conversation about the importance of Latinos making a plan to vote this election. You know, the goal of the NRDC Action Fund this election and every election is to encourage voters who care about the environment and climate change to vote to support candidates that make these issues their priority as well. You know, we firmly believe that the fight for climate change, for clean air, clean water, environmental justice, and clean energy future requires that people take the time to vote and make their views known. You know, we know that this change that we're seeking isn't going to just happen. We actually have to show up, and we have to do, the first step is just to get ourselves to the polls. And we know that many issues motivate voters, and we believe that Latino voters are also motivated by what they're seeing happening with the environment and with climate. We know that in no single issue is the one that gets them there. There are a plethora of issues that are touching Latino lives every day. So we're really, really proud to support the work that Unidos US Action Fund is doing to mobilize voters in this critical election. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation and hearing from this great lineup of panelists that you have.
Angela, thank you so much. It's very appropriate that we now turn to Nilda Ruiz of APM to give us her thoughts around the sort of state of play and what's at stake for Latino voters in Pennsylvania, not only because of her role at APM and as the chairwoman of the National Puerto Rican Agenda, but in her role at APM, she's been very engaged in incorporating best practices around environmental justice within our organization. So there's a lot of synergy with this conversation. So Nilda, just your thoughts with your APM and MPRA hats around, you know, what's at stake here. Latinos have a lot on the line here in Pennsylvania in 2020.
I would say, you know, I think that what's at stake is our democracy. You know, voting is a privilege that we just kind of take for granted today, but a lot of people have lost their lives to give us this right to vote. And it's sad how many people take it for granted. But, you know, we have a voting system that is outdated. Voter suppression has been something that it has a long history, but it's even uglier inside the Latino community. For Pennsylvania, even more of our vote is at stake. We will be voting for respect. Um, we've seen all too well what has happened in the last couple years, how we've been treated right through the fiscal crisis in Puerto Rico when we had the Hurricane Maria, and how they reacted to that and how slow it was in giving services to Puerto Rico, not even recognizing that we were citizens. And I mean, I don't even need to keep going because it's so well known, but we are voting for that. And there's so many people in Puerto Rico that are not able to vote for the president. So by us being able to vote, we're voting for those that don't have a voice. So for Puerto Ricans, it even becomes even stronger. And then in Pennsylvania, the last election was won by 44,000 votes. That's how they got the electoral vote here in Pennsylvania. When we think there's over 344,000 Puerto Ricans and Latinos that are eligible to vote right now, we're almost a million. So if even half of us got out and voted, we could turn this whole election around. So, I mean, we're voting for credibility. I mean, I think when we go out as leaders to ask people to give us funding, the first thing they look at is what community do you have behind you? And the only way that they can really calculate that, I mean, it's their self-interest, right? How many voters do they have, or how much money can you give us, right? If we have a huge voting block, even if your person doesn't win, the numbers are there. And we need to get out for better education, for better medical benefits for here and for the island, right? For better housing, for our infrastructure in our communities, and also for more humane treatment of our people that are with mental health issues, that have addictions, that are incarcerated. Here in Philadelphia, we see the whole opioid crisis, right? And the majority of the people that are here in Philadelphia are white men that come from the suburbs. And there's all this treatment, and it's really sad to look at that in the 70s and 80s that I grew up in Philadelphia, and we had those issues in our community. They just locked them up. So, I mean, I can't stress it enough. We need to vote. And if you don't vote for yourself, vote for your families and for the others that are in Puerto Rico and that are in other areas that don't have a voice. And I'm not even talking about how immigrants are treated, putting kids in cage. I mean, we just need to think about all of that. And we need to vote and make our voice heard. And the best way to make our voice heard right now is by voting.
Very well said, Nilda. I want to turn to you, Will, because even before the COVID-19 pandemic hit our shores, Pennsylvania was in the process of developing a alternative method of voting by mail. The use of it and the accessibility of it and the is now even under more scrutiny for obvious reasons. So, Will, as folks watching this are thinking about, okay, I haven't focused much on this, I have to start with making a plan to vote, help my family members, help my abuela, help other people, maybe a young person in my family that's new to voting. Can you help us lay out some of the voting options and how vote by mail comes into play?
No, gracias. I agree with Angela and with Nilda. Yes, I mean, the opportunity of voting by mail today is huge because we as Latinos come from countries where election day was a holiday. And while here, it's tough because you're trying to work two jobs, take the kids to school, deal with this, deal with that. And sometimes it was difficult to do. And in Pennsylvania, this is the first election where we'll have no excuse voting by mail. The problem with voting by mail, however, is that it's a process-ridden challenge. There was a great column by for English speakers. Let's forget about people who are limited English proficient. And by the way, Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act requires that information for those who live in counties, and some counties in Pennsylvania, Lehigh, Berks, and Philadelphia, are supposed to get everything that they get in English in Spanish as well, including the ballot. But even for English speakers, the process of voting by mail is fraught with a lot of challenges. We produced some videos, and if you can show them while we're talking, you can see, and there's a number of challenges related to voting by mail, which is great, right? You can vote from your privacy of your home, and the other thing is that you can also go to your center of elections or a satellite site that is a center of elections and ask for your vote by mail application, fill it out, and they will give you a ballot to be able to vote by mail right there and then. And so you get this envelope, you have this reading that you have to do, luckily in English and in Spanish. There's some ballot questions in Philadelphia. If you're in Philadelphia, maybe those who are in other towns have to read their ballot for ballot questions. You read it carefully, you follow the instructions. In Philadelphia, it's very important that you fill out the oval completely, not a check mark, not an X. And then once you get the ballot done, you got to put it in your secrecy envelope, your privacy envelope. If you send it without that privacy envelope, it's a naked ballot. No, you're not voting naked. It's just that it happens to be naked because it doesn't have the privacy. Then you have to put it in this, the bigger envelope and make sure that it fits in there well. And then last but not least, you have to sign the declaration that you have voted in private, that you are who you are. Please note that it's just a signature. In Pennsylvania, we are blessed that it's not required that it exactly match your signature. I registered to vote the last time in 1991, and my signature probably doesn't match because our signature changes. Follow the instructions, take your time, it's tough. The dog is barking, the cat is meowing, your spouse is being a pain in the butt. Just hang in there, follow all the instructions. In Pennsylvania, you don't have to put stamps. No postage necessary. There's a misinformation and disinformation campaign saying that you should put 2 stamps on it. No, you don't have to put any stamps. All votes in Pennsylvania and in some other jurisdictions, you do not require to put a stamp on it. So these are the little steps. And you know what? If you have a question, call your nonprofit, call APM, call Esperanza, call your church, reach out to Unidos US, go visit Ve Vota. Just get information so that you don't get confused about what to do. Su voto es su voz.
Very well said. And I would, before we engage Jody in this conversation, I would also recommend, particularly if you live in Philadelphia, these voting centers are one-stop shops. So if you haven't applied for your vote by mail application, which you can do online at, is it Votes PA or PA Votes? I always confuse it, Will. PAvotes.com.
Votes PA.
So, there's it right in the heart of the barrio at Munoz Marin School, 4th and Lehigh is one of the voting centers. Northeast Philadelphia, a lot of our friends live in the great Northeast. George Washington High School, Temple University, right on Broad Street. And there's other centers throughout the city where you can go apply for your application there, get some assistance to make sure that you have someone to help you with this process. And then you immediately get your ballot and go vote. So they're open every day. So I would encourage people this weekend, we maybe have a little more time to go to one of these voting centers and make your plan. Jody, I want to engage you in this conversation. Esperanza has a lot of different avenues to engage our community and all kinds of services and programs. But in this case, you're utilizing your reach to engage people and helping them make a plan. So can you share the experience Esperanza has had so far in helping people make a plan to vote this cycle?
Yeah, absolutely, Rafael. And thank you so much. We're really pleased to be representing as just one of the many really strong, passionate, dedicated Latino nonprofit organizations or community-based organizations in North Philadelphia and throughout the city. We're pleased to be representing just one of those many efforts that's taking place across the city with a focus on our Latino voters. And as Nilda, my colleague Nilda alluded to earlier, it seems pretty straightforward in the sense that we know we lag in terms of civic engagement and engagement with the electoral process. We know we lag in the statistics related to voter registration and voter turnout. And so in that sense, we have our work kind of cut out for us, but there's complexities involved here, right? In this case, in our communities, sometimes, even though there's so much at stake, as Nilda outlined earlier, we have to start from the place of talking to our community members about why it is so important for them to become engaged. We have to talk to them about why their vote actually does matter and their participation matters. And so we try to start as early as possible with those kinds of outreach efforts around how this affects you, your family, and not just today and in your day-to-day life today, but for the future as well in really important ways. So we start that kind of education early. And then when it comes to information like what my colleague Will Gonzalez just shared about the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the process, we are going full court press, as so many other organizations are, because we have a number of different constituency groups, even within the Latino communities in Philadelphia, to reach, and they're reached in different ways, right? We have not just kind of the mainstream groups of registered voters and unregistered voters, but also elderly populations, youth who are just coming into this process for the first time, perhaps this year, and are perhaps hearing, all of the news about why this election is so critical and so important for them to begin to make their voices heard as soon as they can. And other kinds of disenfranchised groups, the immigrant populations that Nilda mentioned, and different information that may be needed for each of those. So we are reaching out, again, as many of our colleague organizations are, through text message campaigns, through phone calling campaigns, through door-to-door canvassing. We do operate the Impacto newspaper, which on a weekly basis publishes information about not just the civic engagement process, but very specific information about and reminders related to deadlines around registration, filing for that mail-in ballot, when to submit it, where to submit it, et cetera. And so we're providing as much information and support as we possibly can to people who not only need to know where to go, how to fill out the ballot, but also need to be protected, as has been mentioned, from the confusion and the both misinformation and disinformation about how to participate in this process. And given that many aspects of this election process has been somewhat, due to the COVID crisis, have been somewhat more uncertain than in past election cycles, we're trying to stay a few steps ahead of any possible changes in information that our population might need to know about where to go and how to participate. So any way you can possibly think of to reach out to different groups and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to fulfill their civic duty and to make their voice heard, we are actively engaging in all of those.
It's very important because as we've seen from the media reports on social media, particularly our Spanish-speaking population is getting fed a lot of misinformation around the voting process, around all kinds of things that could impact their interest or their confidence in this process. Nilda, through APM and MPRA, you're engaging voters in this election. So just share with us some observations you're having from engaging Latino voters in Pennsylvania this cycle.
So we're working with a few, including Unidos. We did a rally back in October 13 with the Urban League and Unidos. And it was, Janet was here, it was my birthday. I told her she was my birthday gift. That was a lot of fun. So we've been doing things like that. But you know what's really surprising to me is the apathy sometimes in our community. When we were out, like we went to the different Cousins supermarket and we would register people to vote, and people would just go, I don't know if they're just fed up with so many people coming at them, but we still, we registered a little over 125 so far. But we've done double that, just changing their address or correcting where they were at. So even though they may have been registered, but they didn't have the right address and so on. But anyway, moving forward, we are doing, we're trying to connect Puerto Ricans in a way that they're connected to in Puerto Rico. So we have these drives, these caravans, and these called, I learned the new term, tumbacocos, that we're going to go through the community.
Angela's co-signing on that one.
Yeah, so this weekend on Saturday, oh, can you take, I'm sorry. My niece is here. She's like with the dogs. I'm sorry. This weekend we're gonna start on Saturday, Allentown, Lehigh Valley, because we really need all of Pennsylvania, especially those suburban areas. So we're gonna be starting on Saturday. There's a big caravan of motorcycles, Jeep trucks, and so we're going to be doing the caravan from 12 to 5, and we're going to do Allentown, Lancaster, Reading, Bethlehem. And then on Sunday, the 25th, this Sunday, from 1 to 5, we will have a caravan here. We're going to start at Cousins Supermarket at 5th and Berks, which is our supermarket, our area. From there, we're going to tour all of APM's area. We're going to go around Norris Square, then Taller Puertorriqueño. We're going to go up to Lehigh, to all of ASA's area, the Roberto Clemente housing around Aspira, Esperanza, Concilio. Then we're going to go to Juniata, and then we're going to end up at Harrogate Plaza too. So we're going to end up there at 5. The following weekend on Halloween, we're going to do this run again. But this time, both of them, the Allentown, Lehigh Valley, and Philadelphia will be done simultaneously. So again, we will meet at 5th and Burke. So anyone that wants to join us there. I have this 3-wheeler motorcycle. I love riding. So I'm thinking I may take it and go around. I'm going to put Puerto Rican flags in the back.
That's awesome.
And I hope they don't say, "Mira esta vieja trying to look young," you know? But I'll do it to get out the vote. So anyway, we're going to do a repeat of that on Halloween. And then November 1st through the 3rd, we're going to help voters on getting out the vote. We have these flyers with QSRs. So all they have to do is that's how we've been registering them at events. So all they have to do is take their camera, do the QR, and it'll take them to where to vote, how to vote. And then Unidos has a great site. I went on it today on how to be able to plan to vote, you know, and lines are going to be long. And this is going to be an election like no other. So when we say plan, and I get a lot of people say, well, what do you mean plan to vote? When we were at 4th and Lehigh at the Julia de Burgos, we registered people. Even my secretary, she had her vote thing. It was her first time ever voting. She went, registered, and voted at the same time. There was a huge line. I mean, it was going enormous all the way around. So you have to plan for that. So if you can do early voting, that would be great, because you can actually go to these centers. Well, now you can't register, it's done, but you can go there and vote if you're already registered. You can mail in or you can do in person. But you kind of need to plan who you're going with, because it's going to be a long line, and you need to, you know, pack up some snacks or whatever. And
what I'm recommending, particularly for activists and people that have the privilege to be able to vote early in whatever manner you're doing that through vote by mail, is that you need to vote now or very soon, because there's someone in your family, to Nilda's point, that on election day, you're going to have to help them vote.
Exactly.
And we're making, you know, we're making phone calls now to Latino voters in Philadelphia. And what the dynamics we're finding is that people are excited. They want to vote. They're not scared to go vote because of COVID. They understand the risk, but they know it's important to vote. But if you're above 50, you're like, all that vote by mail stuff, I want to go vote on election day to my polling place and my comfort zone. So inevitably, we're going to have a population, to Nilda's point, that is going to vote on election day, that we need to help. So I think it's incumbent on us, for us that understand a little more confidence process, to get our votes done out the way early, so we can dedicate some time on election day to help others go vote safely and accurately. Will,
and I was just going to say, a lot of people don't trust the system, so they want to be there on election day, you know.
That's right.
The other thing we're doing, just to wrap up, is the media, social media. So we're working through Facebook, Mi Gente, the National Puerto Rican Agenda, through Unidos, but all the Hispanic Federation, getting out through media, but not everybody is, on Facebook or media. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. So Will, even before this election cycle, you and working with all of us on some level have been very engaged in working with activists and our county commissioner offices to ensure that Latino voters, and particularly Spanish-speaking voters, had access to voting. So can you talk about some of the resources that, whether it's making a plan to vote early, or on election day, that Latinos should understand they have a right to have access to, as it relates to translation and other services for Latino and language minority voters?
Oh, gracias, Rafael. And as you know, you've been part of the work, and Unidos US has been part of the work, so has APM and Esperanza, around making sure that Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act is followed. Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act says that if any jurisdiction has more than 10,000 people who speak a language other than English, eligible voters who speak a language other than English, or 5%, then that means that all information must be provided in that language. And so in Pennsylvania, we have Berks County, Lehigh County, and Philadelphia County as counties that everything must be provided in English and Spanish. And that's why when you go to vote in those counties, you'll see the ballot, you'll see information in English and Spanish. We've had some challenges, right? Especially out in Berks and especially out in Lehigh. Philadelphia, even in Philadelphia, we have to fight. But we just need to make sure that you have access totally in Spanish. That means when you call your local county office, when you look at the ballot, when you look at the information, that it's in Spanish and in English. And if you have any problems with that, let us know. We're part of Unidos US and its affiliates, and others are part of this voter protection network that is part of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, the 1-866-OUR-VOTE. In Spanish, it's 1-888 Ve y Vota. And you put that, and you can get information about where to vote, what the laws are in your state. And also, if you want to report something, it's very important that if you see something, say something, because that information is noted and helps our attorneys follow up on any bad things. I think somebody, I think it might have been Rafael, mentioned misinformation and disinformation. That's going to be rampant. Mm-hmm. So if you get a text, if you get a Facebook post, if you get something that says such and such polling place was closed, call your local community-based organization, call APM, call Esperanza, call your church and say, is this true? What's going on? Double check your information. We're going to have a lot of people trying to deceive us and to try to desviarnos, as they say in Spanish, try to move us away from going out to vote if you want to vote. The same thing with your vote by mail. Make sure that you are not taking, like, you got to put 2 stamps on an envelope. You don't have to put no freaking 2 stamps. It's all postage paid and other things. So it's very important that we trust our trusted messengers, and that includes all the organizations that people have had interactions with. So yes, again, you have the right to secure information in your language. And if for any reason you're in some county that is not covered by the Section 203 of the Voting Rights Act, and you're having difficulty finding information in your language, just call Ve y Vota, 1-888 Ve y Vota, and they'll give you information about it.
Angie, I wanted to engage you back in this conversation because you're working with leaders all over the country. I know you work with a lot of leaders in Florida and advocates everywhere. So just any thoughts listening to our Pennsylvania advocates around the challenges that they're facing and that they're educating our people to overcome? Just any thoughts you have about resources or best practices you're seeing around the country you wanted to share?
Sure. Everything that's been said, I agree with. They're absolutely right. Go to trusted messengers, those organizations in the community that you interact with and interface. They'll have oftentimes the best information. One of the things that NRDC Action Fund did, we put information of course, up on our website, nrdcactionfund.org, where people could go and check, verify their registration. And if they weren't registered, the opportunity to do so. We're putting out information asking people, check with your state election office or your county election board to make sure that you know the latest about the rules for voting. No two elections ever alike. There are usually rule changes in between. So you want to make sure that you have the latest information about how to cast your vote in your county. Making sure that you know where your polling locations are, as William said, so that you don't think you've made a plan to go somewhere where suddenly, well, it's not there, it's somewhere else, and you may not have the means to be able to get there. So that's why it's so critically important to sort of make a checklist for yourself of the things that you're going to need to do and make happen before then, whether it is a vote by mail, absentee, in-person early voting, or date of. We certainly want to encourage people to be safe, making sure that they're wearing a mask, they have gloves, that they have hand sanitizer. I know one organization that we're working with, they were very direct with us. They said, we need resources to be able to have that kind of stuff around for us, be able to give someone a pair of gloves, to be able to give them some hand sanitizer, because they knew that their members of their community weren't going to vote by mail. They were going to go day of. And so this was their way of making it as safe as possible for those voters. So I agree with what's been said. Like I said, we put resources, information on our website. We are just wanting to make sure that we keep amplifying that message of voting safe, voting early if possible, because it's really, you're seeing long lines, and we're going to continue seeing long lines. There's several more days left to this cycle, and we just want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be able to cast their ballot safely.
Absolutely. I want to get some final thoughts from our panelists. Jody, I want to turn to you because Esperanza's going to be very busy over the next 12, 13 days engaging voters. So can you share with us some of the work you're going to be doing to get voters this very critical information to make a plan to vote, and obviously to vote on election day, and anything else you wanted to share from the perspective of Esperanza around making a plan to vote?
Thank you, Rafael. Yeah, and we will continue all of the efforts that I described in terms of that full court press of outreach of all different kinds. And so I know that will be happening not just from Esperanza, but all over the city from other organizations. I think one of the things that we're doing in response to some of the most common questions that we've seen so far is to try to attend to those parts of the process that seem to be getting the most concern or the most need. And so, among those things are the clarification of even details of the process that make people anxious about whether or not they're participating in the right way or if their vote is going to be counted. Folks have asked us if they can drop off ballots, mail-in ballots at a particular voting location, on not just for themselves, but for other members of their families as well. And we have to educate people on the rule that governs that and states that they can in fact only drop off their own ballot unless they've gone through a process to be approved, essentially, to drop off ballots on behalf of family members who may be elderly or sick or disabled or in other ways unable or more limited in their ability to drop off their own ballots. We talk to people about transportation issues. We're trying to help facilitate the network of resources when, Esperanza as a community-based organization cannot provide a particular service that a voter might need, like a ride to the polls. We're forming those networks with the other organizations and partners that can step in to help with those needs as well. So really, once we have the buy-in from community members around why they should participate and the basic mechanics of participation, then a lot of the support becomes around those details, those nitty-gritty details at the end of the day that could make it or break it for someone, especially if they're anxious already and concerned about the process. And so the other thing I'd say that we're trying to do a little preemptively and just get ahead of it is to communicate to people that particularly this year, given all of the differences functionally this year, that we likely will have to wait a bit longer for the election outcome to be announced. And so as folks are used to having those results reported either late on the night of the election or at least the day after, that if we're waiting for the process to be concluded for days or even weeks, that people should not get discouraged and should not think that their participation didn't matter, and that they should continue to advocate within their communities for the integrity of the election for that sort of fair process that all of us are guaranteed to participate in this democracy. So those are some of the things that we're trying to get ahead of. And of course, as you know, Rafael, we're also working with young people in partnership with Unidos US, where we've put together a youth task force that hopefully we will be able to carry into future election cycles around registering peers to vote. And like my colleagues here, information is available on Esperanza's website. We're pointing folks toward PhiladelphiaVotes.com. So they're just trying to surround people in every possible way, not just through the process of the election, but beyond, and positioning them to become engaged and active citizens and residents far after this election is over.
And I know on election day, Esperanza, 8 p.m., Ceiba, they're going to really be hubs of information. So if you're in the neighborhood and you're looking for information, you literally can just walk in and someone will be there to help you out. And you might see people like me and Jody giving people rides. Nilda, your final thoughts around this conversation, and just anything else you wanted to share about the work APM and MPRA will be doing for the rest of the cycle.
Oops, Nilda, you're still muted.
You're on mute. It's late and dogs running around. My final thoughts are that the Latino community is now in 2020, we're well poised to be a large voting bloc. We are the largest minority right now. We need to get out and we need to vote. And, we need to decide when, where, and how we're going to vote. Plan it with your families, whether it's going to be in person, early voting. And, we're very quick when there's discrimination. Whenever we feel that we're second-class citizens or whatever, we're very quick to cry out and say, oh, this discrimination. Well, you know what? We have right now is our opportunity to be able to say something, to do something about it. So, it sounds harsh, pero si no vota, no cuenta. If you don't vote, you don't count. So no te queje. If people do not go out and vote, they don't have a right to complain afterwards. I don't want to hear it.
And Nilda, as you said earlier, we're not only voting for ourselves and our community, we're voting for our family in Puerto Rico that does not have the opportunity to vote for this federal election, and also for the immigrant community that is a big part of our community and our families, but obviously does not have the opportunity to vote formally. So we're doing it for many people. So our vote counts for many. Will, just any other information or guidance you want to give our folks as they help people make a plan in 2020?
No, thank you. And please, I know we wish that we had a better system of government, that we had better candidates, that we had better attention to our community. But at this time, there's an opportunity to decide between two or other candidates. So if you're looking at the presidency, it's 2, 3. If you're looking at your local elected officials, or state rep, your state senator, your city council person, depending on what city you live, just make a choice and then participate. Elections are not every 4 years, they're every 6 months. Every year there are 2 elections. And then you can participate in public hearings. So we can deal with that later and we'll help you figure that out. But for now, when November 3rd comes, participate. Don't complain later. The stakes are very high.
Thank you so much, Will. Angela, as our national partner in this collaboration, would like you to close us out with some final thoughts.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, again, Rafael, William, Nilda, And Jody, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be part of this conversation with you all this evening. I would just reiterate again, NRDC Action Fund, our goal is to get out those voters, those that care about the environment, that care about climate action, making sure that they have the resources and the information to go and make an informed decision about who they want representing them. I know the same goes for a Latino community. We want to make sure that we're working with associations, organizations that are deep in the community, empowering the community, building up their strength, not just as a voting bloc, but as leaders. And we look forward to a continued relationship, a continued conversation with Unidos US Action Fund and others to really build out this relationship and build out the strength of this community. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of this tonight.
No, Angela, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of my panelists and our producer, Daisy Gonzalez, in the background for putting this together. Look, y'all, Nilda said it best. It's showtime, family. So we need to come out to vote. We need to get involved, make a plan, get your vote done so you can help other family members. And on election day, you could take a day off, go to any of these organizations, say, look, I got a car, I got a couple masks or a few bucks for pizza for volunteers, and you can make a great contribution over the next few weeks. Thank you all so much for joining us during this conversation, and make sure you go out and vote by election day.
Thank you.
Thanks in advance for voting, right?
That's right.
Exactly.